Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic 90s nerds to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, we talk about everything from Nickelodeon slime to horror movie slashers, but plenty of stuff in between, too. Today's video, it's a little negative. I feel a little bad. We're going to be talking about my least favorite reads from 2021. Yes, it is 2022, but we're starting the year off by looking back and trying to kind of reminisce about what I felt about all the books I read in 2021. There will be other, more positive videos coming up in this series that I'm going to be doing this month, including a very fun, basically an award ceremony for different books, and I've got a whole bunch of categories planned for that, so that'll be like best books for the most part, certain categories and stuff like that. However, there will be, I think, an award, I guess you could call it an award, for the most disappointing book. But today, we are just focusing on my least favorite reads of 2021. I will not be ranking them in any sort of order from, worst to really worst, or, okay to very least favorite. I'm just going to kind of give you my bottom 5, essentially, out of the whole year. Alright, so, without further ado, let's go into the intro. When we come back, we will, unfortunately, discuss my least favorite books of the year. Here we go. Welcome back, guys! Okay, so this is going to be a bottom 5 out of all the reads I read in 2021, and I will have one honorable mention, so technically 6 books mentioned. I might throw in a 7th there. Out of all the books I read, which, this is a spoiler because I'm going to be doing a whole stats thing as part of my award ceremony, but I basically read 80 books in 2021, which is the most I've ever read ever in my whole life. Not just in a year, but in like the entirety of my life put together. So pretty cool. I'm very proud of myself because, I just discovered my love of reading a few years ago and it's really taken off and it's just been so lovely and fun. And my 2022 reading has actually kicked off with a bang because luckily the 2 books that I've already read thus far, which, we're not very far into January, it's only the 4th, the day I recorded this. So, that's pretty good already. 2 books read and I actually enjoyed them both very much. So already off to a good start. And mostly 2021 was good as well. Again, out of 80 books, only 6 or 7 mentions of books I didn't really enjoy or were really disappointed by. That's not too bad, in my opinion, when you really kind of look at the overall number of books I read. So that means I mostly enjoyed everything. I will say there was a lot of middle-of-the-road type of reads for 2021, but there were a lot of great reads too. And so that's good that there's only a little bit of really bad reads, in my opinion. And I do want to remind you guys that reading is subjective. You guys know this. So, just because I didn't love these books, in fact, 2 of the books will be controversial because they're kind of well-liked and well-loved by a lot of people, especially people on BookTube and on Bookstagram. And if you look on Goodreads, they're relatively well-reviewed. But we'll get there when we get there. Like I said, everyone has their own opinions, and I think that's what makes talking about books so much fun. I can listen to what you guys think about books, whether it's in the comments or if I'm watching other booktuber videos, and you guys can listen to what I think about books and why. And I just think that's so cool, and as long as we're respectful, it's okay to have differing opinions on books and stuff like that. So we'll get into the controversial picks in a second, but yeah, I want to remind you guys that just because I don't like it doesn't mean that you shouldn't read it. I'm actually a huge advocate of why don't you just pick it up for yourself anyway if you're interested in the book. Don't let me dissuade you. Why don't you just give it a try and see for yourself what you think about it. Just don't take what I say as like the Bible, because your opinion could be completely different. We have different experiences that we base our opinions off of, etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of different things and different factors that go into why our opinions are the way they are. It is what it is, and we all have different tastes. So without further ado, let's get into the bottom books, I would call them most disappointing books, and they're all here for different reasons, I guess, in one way, shape, or form on this list, so we'll get into it. Alright, the first one, and again, this is in no order, I'm not going from 5, which would be, okay, to my very, very least favorite. I'm just giving you, these are all equally kind of my not favorites. My least favorites. Oh my god, I can't speak. Alright, whatever. 2022, I still can't talk. Whatevs. Alright, so this is probably no surprise. I talked about this in one of my wrap-ups. I read this in honor of a Friday the 13th because I was born on a Friday the 13th, and we did have I think only 1 or 2 in 2021. We only have 1 in this year, 2022, so I will be reading more thematic stuff, and hopefully I will like it more than this read, which I read for the Friday the 13th I celebrated in 2021. Friday the 13th is a huge day for me and my family. We usually go out to eat every Friday the 13th because there's not that many. And because, you know, I was born on one, we were like, oh, it's such a special day. It's such a weird day. And it really explains, honestly, the reason I'm so weird, I think. That's why I'm so zany and just unusual. I think it all is due to being born on a Friday the 13th, but that's neither here nor there. Alright, so basically, I was really excited to get into this. It's a vintage horror book, early 2000s, not like, you know, really vintage, like 90s or 80s, but still consider it kind of vintage-y, because it's still, we're in 2022, it's like 20 years old at this point. That's insane to think about. In fact, let me give you the exact date that this one was published. 2009, so I thought it was 2002, but 2009, still pretty old at this point. And the premise seemed interesting enough, the cover's kind of cool, so I was going into it being like, yeah, whatever. Alright, so let me just read you the description real quick.
Castle House Lodge. A century ago, it was an exclusive resort hotel, but for years it stood empty, a haunting shadow of its former glories. Now, after 25 years of rumors and ghost stories, the overgrown grounds are showing signs of being tended. The building itself has been repaired. Castle House has new occupants. What was once a haven for the elite is now a madhouse, a private asylum for pregnant women. But are all the patients really insane? And is it just a coincidence that people have begun to disappear from the nearby town? David Shale's girlfriend is one of the missing, and he's determined to find out the truth behind the mysterious Dr. Rockford and his House of Secrets.
It sounds okay. It sounds like, oh yeah, whatever, it should be a lot of fun, a crazy asylum, and maybe that's not what it seems, maybe there's ghosts all around. Let me just tell you guys, this is basically like
demonic orgies.
That's all you need to know going into this read, is basically, essentially all it's about is demonic orgies. That's what I feel it is. There are these, like, goddesses and gods that they pray to. I don't even understand. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not against reading crazy stuff in books that have to do with sexual stuff. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, if you read Richard Lehman, he's got crazy sexual, like, I guess, overtones in his books, over-sexualized characters and stuff like that. If you read stuff like Toy Cemetery, the main character, every woman is attracted to the main character at one point in Toy Cemetery, and ridiculous stuff happens there too. So it's not like that's what turned me off. It was just that the storyline did not save it. It did not compensate for the weird sexual stuff that was really overdone. And essentially, that is basically the weird, evil stuff that is going on. It's like, you know, they're trying to bring forth this creature, and to do that, you have to have these demonic orgies and these crazy ceremonies. Anyway, whatever.
Demonic orgies.
That's basically it. That's all you need to know. That's why I didn't like it. It wasn't interesting. It dragged on. And damn, now that I'm looking at this, I didn't remember it being this long. It is 300 and flippin' 23 pages. My god, I can't believe I read all that. And, you know, the text isn't super big, so yeah, it felt like a waste of time. And I was really bummed because I wanted to have a really positive experience when I was celebrating Friday the 13th. So, not good. I wouldn't recommend it. And I was so excited to get into it, and so that's why it's definitely on my least favorite reads of the year from 2021 list. Okay, and next up on my list, unfortunately I don't have a physical copy, or maybe it's fortunate that I don't have it because I wouldn't buy it because I didn't really absolutely love it. So, this one has mixed reviews. It's not like it's super well reviewed. But this is going to be The Mask, and this one falls on my least favorite list from 2021 because I just expected much more. And this was by Owen West, aka Dean Koontz. And unfortunately, I did not like it very much. However, it won't dissuade me from picking up more Dean Koontz books in the future. In fact, I own The Watchers, which I would love to get to, and I've heard great things about that one. Like I said, The Mask isn't super well reviewed. It's not like his most popular work or anything. I just felt like it abruptly ended. Parts were decent, but it took too long to get to where it was going. and the writing wasn't anything marvelous. This is an earlier work by Koontz, hence why he used the name Owen West. He wasn't even popular as Dean Koontz yet, so that's part of the reason why it wasn't even written under his name. It's a super early work, and I think that shows. I even wrote on my Goodreads, this book wasn't bad, I just know that it could have been better than what it was. It was quick and breezy, but I wish the characters had a little more depth. That's definitely true. The plot started to move extra fast midway through, but the ending, like I told you guys, was sudden, felt open-ended. It could have been more substantial. So that's my thoughts, and it helps that I wrote a review because I wouldn't have been able to remember that in depth what it was about, because again, it's just totally faded from my mind, and that tells me that it wasn't a super memorable read, and I feel like it's extra justified that it's on this bottom 5 list from my 2021 reads. Alright, next up, here we're getting into the controversial ones. The next 3 are controversial because I think people like all the ones I'm going to mention. So first up, let's go with another physical copy. Again, this is in no order, so I'm just being random here. So, this is going to upset some people because, I don't know, this is really well reviewed on Goodreads in particular. Alright, so this is part of a series of books. In fact, I think the sequel to this came out recently in the end of 2021. So I read this with my book club, my private book club that I run with my friend Kat. This is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. And yeah, I've heard it described as a dark Harry Potter, which I was excited about. I was like, okay, Harry Potter. Harry Potter is one of my favorite series of books. Back when I didn't even like to read, or didn't think I liked to read, I loved Harry Potter. And that just tells you how well written Harry Potter is, and how it can even turn non-readers, or people who think they are non-readers, into readers, and really get them invested, and get them into the idea of reading. It's just such a great universe. Don't even get me started on how much I love Harry Potter. By the way, I just watched the anniversary special on HBO Max for the movies. Oh my god, it was incredible. I totally cried at the end. Very heartwarming, and so cool to hear the actors' thoughts on the movies, 20 years later. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, Dark Harry Potter should be great, right? Nah, it did not live up. It was a huge disappointment for me personally. If you guys like it, again, all the more power to you. That's perfectly fine. It just wasn't my jam. And the reason is because I just felt like the universe was way more confusing. It took me a lot longer to get into the story. I had to keep flipping around to understand the universe. And luckily I read this on, or I should say, I listened to this on audiobook, so that helped a lot. Otherwise, I'm not sure I would have gotten through it as fast as I did. And again, it took me actually weeks, listening little by little. And the only reason I pushed myself to finish, per se, was because I was reading it for my book club. Now, I'll give you the perspective of more than one person, more than just me. So, my book club, the majority of people felt the same way I did. There were glimmers of good things in the book, it got okay. But there were also a lot of annoying things. The confusion, we all agreed on that. The universe was not as clear and well-defined as Harry Potter at all. Now, she did flesh out the universe and tried to explain it. I just didn't get into it. I didn't buy into it. It just was super over my head, I guess. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to understand the universe itself. But, my book club, a lot of them felt the same. Now, one member of my book club, she loves this book. She is one of the reasons why I decided to nominate it. Because she was like, oh, it's great. I love Harry Potter. It was wonderful. And she had a really good perspective because it was just different. I love hearing different perspectives. And hers was that the main character really grates on your nerves, but she liked that. She liked that, at first you're kind of annoyed by the main character. She's mean, but then you kind of get on her side as the novel goes on. So our main character, I don't even remember her frickin' name. And that just tells you a lot right there. She has this love-hate relationship, mostly hate. It's one of those frickin'... It read like a YA novel, a badly done YA novel in my opinion, because I didn't like the romance. It was kind of in the forefront where she was an enemy of this guy, but the guy was always saving her life, and she was saying,
I can't stand him saving my life,
and blah, blah, blah. I don't know, it just became really whiny and annoying. I did empathize with the main character because the reason she was so mean was because, everyone always disliked her and was really mean to her, so she kind of had to develop a thick skin and fend for herself. I don't know, it just didn't save it for me. It was not enjoyable. I I was not happy with the main character. However, like I said, my friend Steph, she thought the main character was spunky. She liked her, and she grew to love her as the story went on. Now, like I said, she does become a little more likable, but at the end, I still didn't like her that much more than in the beginning. And so, the romance part, though, was the worst. I mean, that was even worse than the attitude of the main character was. She didn't like this guy, but then she kind of liked him, and at the end, it's like, and then it leaves you with a cliffhanger right at the end because you know there's going to be a sequel, and there was, like I said, released in 2021 at the end of the year. And so I'm not invested enough, I think, to continue on. Now, I was tempted. The last sentence, I was like, why? Why was that said? What is that going to mean? So yeah, the last line, it got me. I will say it intrigued me a little, but I don't think it's intrigued me enough to pick up another book. Again, I just struggled so much, and it just didn't feel enjoyable. When a book's not enjoyable, you know it's not one of your favorite reads, and in fact, that's what made it one of my least favorite reads, is that I was just struggling, and I just had to keep thinking, I gotta finish this for the book club. But I know it's reviewed very well. However, like I said, the majority of my club didn't like it either, except for my friend Steph, who did love it. And unfortunately, she wasn't with us at the meeting, so she couldn't give us her in-depth thoughts. She did write a post on my Facebook page about it. In fact, I will read you what she said real quick. Alright, so she said, a couple of things that I loved. The concept of the school being a sort of living being that not only is alive, but sort of actively tries to kill the students' love. I jokingly call it Murder Hogwarts when explaining it to others, and as a teacher, the metaphor makes me laugh. The fact that our main character is remotely not likable. Sure, we do grow to love her, but she's not pleasant or likable in a way that fantasy heroes usually are. Her disdain for Arian, oh yeah, that's her love interest, I forgot his name, is hilarious. To me, as I usually cannot stand romantic, real or otherwise, plot lines. But again, it is still a romantic plot line because it's like a hatred that turns into not a hatred. So it's like enemies to lovers, or whatever. Not getting along to lovers. Even though they weren't really lovers at the end, but it was definitely a romantic angle. She also enjoyed the world building as a whole. I want to know more about the enclaves, about the malls, all of it. The emphasis on language in various cultures is also super interesting, she said. Yeah, I just couldn't get into it. It was, like, really confusing, just the language. And I know I can get into other universes because, like I said, I have read and loved Harry Potter. I've also read and loved The Hobbit. So it's not like I can't get into a fantasy type of book, because this is definitely more fantasy than horror, I would say. But yeah, I gotta say I didn't love it. I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. However, I mean, if I had to really think about it, I might even give it 2.5, and I guess I would round it up to 3. So technically, I feel like it's more of a 2.5 for me, because I had 3-star reads in 2021 that I actually really enjoyed. It's just, you know, they weren't great, they had some problems, but yeah, this is a 3-star read in the other end of the spectrum that I didn't enjoy. So what I wrote was, I said, this book is very well reviewed, so I would advise others to pick it up and judge for themselves. And I still want to emphasize that point, because I do think people should judge for themselves. If you like Harry Potter and this intrigues you, go ahead. Don't let me stop you. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you do pick it up. Again, DNFing is always an option if you're finding that you're not enjoying the book and you can't get into it, so why not give it a try and then just DNF if you're not enjoying yourself. I, however, push through. Whatever. It is what it is. Next up, another book I don't have a physical copy of, and this one is probably my most controversial book on this entire list, and it's because a lot of people love this book. However, I read it and I just could not get into it. It felt a little slow to me. I don't know why. I'm sorry, guys. I know you guys probably think differently, but this choice for my bottom list is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Yes, I know, it's like a freaking pillar of horror. Shirley Jackson is herself a pillar as well. Not only is this book kind of talked about like, oh, horror, but she herself as an author is very lauded and discussed among horror fans as being like, you know, basically a huge part of the horror genre, especially a huge woman influence on the horror genre, which I think is really important. I'm not bashing Shirley Jackson as a whole. I would totally love to read other books by her. I just could not get into the story. And here's what I said on Goodreads. I rated it 3 stars, but I rounded it up to 3.75, which I feel like I wouldn't do because I've kind of changed my outlook on ratings right now, so I think I would leave it as a 3, because again, I just did not enjoy it very much. I said, it feels strange that I didn't like this iconic book as much as most other people do. However, it was still an entertaining read. The imagery was vivid, especially the descriptions of the house and the way the townspeople behaved. I enjoyed the unreliable narrator and how she made the reader question the reality of everything. My biggest qualm with the book is that we never find out why certain characters act the way they do, or why they did the things they did. Perhaps, though, the real horror lies in not explicitly knowing why. When I was finished reading the book, I did look up some online analysis of it, and that made me appreciate it a little bit more. Overall, it's definitely worth reading. It is a classic piece of literature, and the author, Shirley Jackson, is an important pillar for the horror fiction genre. So again, I'm kind of telling you guys to take what I say with a grain of salt and still give it a chance. Me, I just felt like, it wasn't very scary or eerie. I'm not really sure how scary it's even meant to be. I mean, I couldn't wrap my head around how I felt about it. I'm all up for slow burns, but this felt like the slowest of slow burns in my opinion. And again, the unreliable narrator, I couldn't really connect with her. I like the idea of not knowing if I believed her or not, but I just could not connect with her as a character, couldn't root for her. And yeah, overall, I found myself being like, when is this going to end? And it's a short book. It's not really long at all. But I was still very eager to get to the end and, get it over with. So that tells me it's definitely in my bottom 5. So again, guys, don't hate me. I know it's a very popular book. I know a lot of you might like it. All the more power to you, as I always say. I don't know why I say that. It's such a weird freaking phrase. All the more power to you. It sounds like a freaking old person thing. Or just I made it sound country just now. But anyway. Yeah, I didn't like it. That's gonna be that. I don't want to elaborate too much. I've already kind of elaborated a lot. So yeah, it's not my favorite, but you guys give it a chance if you want. Alright, and finally, the last official pick on my bottom 5 list, and this one I think is controversial because even my friend Kat liked it a lot, and I think universally this is pretty much well liked. So this is Wraith. It's a graphic novel by Joe Hill. The reason it's on my bottom 5 is because I went in with insanely high expectations. The reason is, this is a prequel to Joe Hill's novel Nosferatu. Of course, that's a reference to the movie Nosferatu, but it's a license plate, so it's spelled out like letters and numbers. That's why I pronounce it that way. But yes, it's in reference to the vampire Nosferatu in the film. So, I thought this was going to be great. Learning more about the antagonist from Nosferatu, Charlie Manx, because this story is centered around Manx and his universe, which is called Christmas Land. So I was like, oh, it's perfect for Christmas. I read this in December. However, one, I wasn't super in love with the art style. Sometimes I even was like, I was getting confused with who was who, the way it was drawn. The text is super small, and I'm not going to go into too many details because I am going to break this down with my friend Kat, and we will get to see her perspective because she felt the opposite way. She loved it. She felt like it added layers to the story. We get to learn a lot about Manx and how he actually acquired the Wraith, and also how Christmas Land, his whole land of horrors essentially that exists in his mind, how that land came to be. The premise of it is that, yes, it exists in his mind, Christmas Land, but also it becomes a physical place because of the Wraith, and because he's got this special ability to kind of use the Wraith to bring people into this kind of thoughtscape, essentially. So yeah, cool concept, especially cool concept because the concept is essentially the same idea as what was touched upon in Nosferatu, except I just didn't like the execution. We're following some criminals in this story, which I felt really not connected to. One of the criminals is actually a good guy. He's only in prison, or on his way to prison, because he did something, out of grief and anguish because he lost his son, and he basically took revenge on this doctor who wouldn't help his son out, and his son ended up, something bad happened to him. So, essentially, I could understand why we were rooting for him, but the people he was with, I was like, I don't want to root for them, and I don't want to root for Charlie Manx, and I just wasn't very engaged, and I kept flipping to the end to kind of see how many pages I had left. I was like, okay, I'm here. How many pages do I have left? And I would flip to the end, and I was like, okay, 20 more pages, 30 more pages. Again, the small text, I think, didn't really help, just because I was like, this is hard to read. And my friend Kat did agree with that the text was super small. Again, the art in the back of the book, ironically, is beautiful, and I love. You see that, it's all in different styles in the back of the book. But when we get to the actual art style of, the people, sorry for the glare, I didn't like that. I don't know. I can't really explain it, to be honest. because maybe it's just me. I will admit that it could be just me. I don't know if you guys read this and felt the same way, or if you read it and loved it. I don't know why I couldn't get into it, because I loved Nosferatu. It was one of my very favorite reads back in 2020 when I first read it. So it is what it is. But let me read you what Kat said. So Kat gave it a full 5 stars, and she said, fans of Nosferatu by Joe Hill will thoroughly enjoy Wraith, the graphic novel prequel to the novel. Wraith is created and written by Joe Hill and brought visually to life by Charles Paul Wilson III and a team of talented artists. Wraith tells the depraved backstory of the monstrous Charlie Manx and the beginnings of Christmasland, his amusement park of horrors. Like I said, she basically texted me and told me she liked the layers it added, and she felt it explained some of Manx and his personality and why he chose to work with people he worked with in Nosferatu. This kind of gives us a backstory and an insight into that, she said. And we'll hear more from Kat when we have our December wrap-up together, because we had a lot of similar reads and same reads. My review says, Nosferatu was one of my favorite reads of 2020, and so I went into Wraith with very high expectations and a lot of excitement to learn more about Christmasland. Alas, I was left disappointed. I just couldn't get into the story for the most part, and I couldn't connect with the majority of the characters. I actually found myself constantly checking how many pages were left as I was reading. However, my friend Kat read this and enjoyed it very much. She thought it was brutal and added layers and insight into the origins of Charlie Manx. I did like those parts that added depth to the Manx character and enjoyed learning where the Wraith came from and how Christmasland came about. It was just the other side of the story with the group of criminals that I did not like. Overall, this was a decent read, but I personally was just expecting much more. And yeah, that's my feelings. I think I summed it up pretty well. I might have repeated some of the things I already said when I was just talking to you guys casually, but yeah, I like to read the reviews because those are my polished thoughts when I had time to sit and think about it, whereas when I'm just spilling out my words to you guys, it's totally like spastic and not as eloquent. But that's basically my thoughts on Wraith. I really want to know you guys' opinions. Have you read any of these books that were on my bottom 5? Did you love them, or did you kind of agree with me? Comment below what you thought, because again, I'm very interested in hearing all of that. Alright, and finally, my honorable mention. I'm only going to do one. So my honorable mention is behind me, so I do have a physical copy. It is Halo by Chet Day, and I did enjoy the local Louisiana references, but we're following a football player named Billy in the story, and it takes place in Louisiana, like I said, and those references were the coolest part of the story. But Billy's pretty evil. He does some really monstrous things. I thought he was going to be straight up demonic. However, that was only kind of vaguely hinted at, wasn't really elaborated on. He was just kind of a bad kid with definite problems. But yeah, I do think he did have some kind of demonic nature in him, or some kind of supernatural flair to him. But just, there was not enough horror to the story. It was a super slow burn, but in the end, it didn't pack enough of a punch to really be worth the time I took to read it. So I'm glad I read it just to say I did, and because I really love the cover. So it's like, oh yeah, I read the book, and I know what I think about it. Overall, it just wasn't my cup of tea. A lot of these books I felt like could have packed a bigger punch, and that includes Halo. And you know, that's why they fell into the bottom list. Again, Halo was okay. I kind of enjoyed it a lot more than Wraith, more than A Deadly Education, more than We Have Always Lived in the Castle, more than my official bottom 5. Because like I said, the references to my home state kind of saved it for me. The author actually lived here for a period of time. I Googled and found out. So that really shows, because he talked about Mardi Gras, but he didn't just talk about it in a outsider's type of way. He talked about it as if he was here and knew about it and experienced it. It wasn't all just like, oh, bourbon, oh, this. Like, he knew streets. He knew about City Park. He knew about even random places in Metairie, which nobody knows about Metairie who's from out of town. They only know about New Orleans. So he really knew his stuff when it came to local places, which I appreciated because, I don't know, whatever. I'm a local. But I think nobody else would have really appreciated that. That's why it didn't make my official bottom 5 list, because it was like, well, at least he represented Louisiana in terms of places and culture type of thing. So yeah, it is what it is. I don't know why that saved it a little bit for me, but yeah, I guess I'm biased because I live here. Anyway, that's my bottom 5 officially and the 1 honorable mention. Thanks guys for checking out this video. And again, I've got some more positive things coming up, including the award ceremony I'm gonna give away like book awards to all of my favorite books for different categories. Like, it'll be a lot of fun. I'm very excited about that. I've already made all these graphics for it. It's gonna be a lot like I did this summer camp themed video where I talked about all these summer camp themed books and I gave awards to those. That's how I talked about the books at the end of the month. So this will be in the same type of vein as that, so I hope you guys will enjoy it. But I will also be doing a separate top 10 list, because in the award video, I'll be talking about a lot more books than just 10 books. I'll be talking about a whole bunch of books, and books that, you know, I liked a lot, but weren't necessarily in my top 10. So, again, lots to look forward to. Until next time, though, guys, you know what you can do. Keep on killing it.